He's in such pain, and he's not the only one in Zimbabwe today. Those who brought this man to the clinic this morning say he had just been beaten by soldiers roaming Harare's suburbs armed with whips, batons and cables. Random retaliation for last week's stay-away and protests.
He is beaten by the soldiers. There were so many with their trucks. And then they go. They promise that they come back again. So we're now feared to stay at home.
We drove to Sekwa, the suburb where the assault took place. On the road, marks where youths burnt tyres last week in protest at a fuel price hike. Young men told me they're unemployed and frustrated. Now they're also frightened. You can see why. In a safe house, we met 23 young people from the same suburb and saw their injuries. We're protecting their identities. They say soldiers broke into their houses on Saturday night and attacked them with an array of weapons.
Yeah, chains, and there were baton sticks. Those are used by the police. And there were wires as well. And those are electrical cables, like braided together in trees. So it's malicious weapons as well, even sticks. And some iron bars as well.
This 19-year-old says they forced him to lie on the ground. The welts are evidence of what happened next. The one young woman in the group showed us where she was attacked. The youngest victim was just 16.
They told us to roll in the tar.
Roll in the tar?
Yeah.
On the road?
Yeah, rolling in the tar like tires. Rolling. After then, they told us to swim in the sewages.
You had to swim in the sewage?
Yeah.
He says he didn't even take part in the protests.
They were burning tires in front of our school gate. So the school teachers told us to stay in our cribs, not to come out, not to do anything, not to participate on that day. Yeah.
President Mnangagwa has been travelling, asking the Russian president for military aid and dropping in on the president of Belarus, a notorious dictator. Many suspect that Mnangagwa is skipping Davos and rushing home to wrest control back from his deputy, the former army chief Constantine Chiwenga.
We don't know who is in charge. Is it Emmerson Mnangagwa? Is it Chiwenga? Is it this guy or that guy? And really, it's for me speaking, particularly to the international community, it's a situation to approach with caution.
Promise Mkwananzi is also in hiding. As one of the national protest leaders, he's calling for more stayaways and demonstrations this week.
We started this protest in 2016 under Robert Mugabe, and it led to his abdication. So we believe that the people's power is the voice of the majority.
The fuel shortage that precipitated this crisis is now acute. The petrol queue seems endless, just like Zimbabwe's problems and the suffering of its people.
Well, we're joined now by the Zimbabwean journalist Violet Gonda, whose journalism saw her barred from her home country for many years by former President Robert Mugabe. When he was ousted in late 2017, she returned to report on the new government. Violet, what we're looking at, those queues of vehicles and the rest of it, this is a backdrop of appalling economic deprivation.
You know, just describing it to people who've never seen it might sound unreal, but people are made to queue for fuel for hours, sometimes for 8 hours, a whole day. What kind of an existence is this where people spend, it's like a job in itself. You spend more time queuing for fuel than even going to work or just staying at home. It's just unbelievable.
What about other necessities?
Shortages, you know, people will spend, even water, just buying bottled water. It's scarce in Zimbabwe. In restaurants, sometimes they didn't even have, when I was there in December, restaurants didn't even have bottled water. So the situation is really bad.
But everything was supposed to get better with Mnangagwa.
So it seemed. Well, what people forget is that Emerson Mnangagwa was always in ZANU-PF. He was part of the team, the group that was with Mugabe all this time. So Mugabe went, but the people remained. The people who were behind this vicious state machinery remained in there, including the army, and nothing has changed.
But, you know, I mean, the African tradition of coups used to be that while the president's away, the next player would play. Now, the next player would appear to be this man, Chiwenga. Is he vice president?
He's the vice
He's
president.
been in charge. He's not moved at all.
No,
except in violence.
There's, you know, the situation in Zimbabwe is unpredictable, like we saw in 2017 with the coup. But at the end of the day, I think the talk about the coup is a distraction, is a decoy to make people concentrate on that issue and not concentrate on the crisis right now, the economic crisis. If Chiwenga was ready to take over, he would be president right now. In fact, he would have been president after the coup. So why didn't he? He's not that popular within the ZANU-PF structures itself.
I mean, the fundamental is there's no money in Zimbabwe at all, as you've already illustrated. Indeed, the South Africans have just refused a $1.2 billion bailout. What is the mechanism beyond bloodshed that will change anything?
I think dialogue. The political parties have to be forced to the negotiating table or to
By
talk.
whom?
The international community, but this time we had a similar situation in 2008, which led to the government of national unity. And I think Zimbabweans are tired of that. They don't want that. Maybe now what's needed in Zimbabwe is some kind of a broad-based political dialogue that also includes other stakeholders like the churches, the civil society, so that everyone who has a stake in this is involved in the talks. Because as we saw when they had the GNU, the opposition just came to clean up the ZANU-PF mess. A few years later, in 2013, we had elections and ZANU-PF continued. So it was the same rigmarole, the same things that happened. We're back to square one.
Violet Gonda, thank you very much indeed for talking with us.